Hey guys, this is Paul McDonald, and welcome to the Men at the Movies rerun series. We're taking some of our favorite movies and conversations from the archive and re-releasing them for you to enjoy. This conversation with Aaron McHugh was from June of 2022, and our discussion still holds up today. How do we have a vibrant life with God? What does it look like to listen to His voice? And what can we expect? We have the answers to these questions and more coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from crazy weather Colorado Springs is Aaron McHugh. Hey Aaron, how you doing this morning?
Doing great. Our 18 inches of snow is melting away here on Wednesday the 25th of May.
Yeah, you guys got like almost 2 feet, 1.5 feet of snow last weekend, and now highs are in the 80s, and my buddy's out there. I think he's ready for some more stable weather. Although we say in North Carolina, you can have all 4 seasons in a week here too.
We do as well. And it's why everyone visits us in the summer, because it's like, then all the lakes are full, the streams are full, there's no bugs, the high country's available for access again. So yeah, it's a pretty spectacular place. Adventure.
So we're not here to talk about weather. Although I will say I watched Field of Dreams, and as we're going to talk about, this was the first time that I saw it. So I'm admitting that I can get my man movie card back now that I've seen this movie. But I watched this Friday, and we were taking my father-in-law out to a baseball game that night. We have a minor league team here, so he loves baseball. He doesn't get out very often, and he hasn't been in a few years. So we said, okay, his birthday was in April. Let's get him some tickets before the weather gets too hot. So the day of the game comes, and the high that day is 96 degrees. I was like, in May, come on. Wow. It's all that climate change stuff. Right. So like I mentioned, we're here talking about Field of Dreams. We've been trying to connect for a while now. The Swiss cheese holes don't always line up very easily. So I'm super excited that we finally got to connect and get to have you on the podcast. So Aaron, the kickoff question that I usually do, why did you pick this movie? Why this, out of all the movies that you could have selected, what is it that you love about Field of Dreams?
What I love about Field of Dreams is that it's both, like, it's very mythical. It's very magical. There's so much wonder to it. There's a line in the movie that I love is Ray Kinsella, played by Kevin Costner. He says to his wife laying in bed, I'm 36 years old. I have a wife and a mortgage. And he kind of goes on this riff, and I'm afraid I'm turning into my father. And yeah, I just find there's like so many lines like that in the movie. So it's a movie about baseball. It's a movie about cornfields in Iowa. It's a movie about kind of the age-old, the beauty of baseball before it was a machine, before it got turned into an industry. It was about the love of the game. It's about the family. It's about fathers. Like, it's got so much in it. And it's circa 1999 or 1996 or something. So it's a little bit in the way back. And for me, I just turned 50. So for me, this was a movie that I was watching like late high school-ish, I remember. So I just recently dusted it off, watched it again. I probably watch it every couple of years, but every time it's like rediscovering its greatness.
Yeah. When I watched it, I emailed you and I was like, I can't believe I haven't seen this movie yet. And it's funny because I'd seen it come up on TV, but it was, like halfway through the movie, and you just sort of jump in with, Terry, James Earl Jones character.
Right.
And It's like, yeah, it never caught on the sort of the over familiarity of the, if you build it, he will come.
Totally. Yeah, you're right. That's like a meme nowadays, right? But
You're
it's
like,
like if you don't really engage in the story and you start from beginning to end to watch through the arc of all that, I find that you don't really get hooked. So sitting down like you did, and now you're hooked, and now you're in.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, where do you want to start on the scenes and topics?
Well, I think when we're looking at it, like you mentioned, there's so many possible roads we could go down. And this idea that we find ourselves like Ray, in our mid 30s, in our mid 40s, in wherever we are in life. Right. And I mean, this is sort of, you from an outsider, you can see, oh, you're having some sort of midlife crisis. You're hearing voices. And it's so that scene where he's in like the feed shop and he's like, have you ever heard anything out that? Not that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you that haven't seen the movie, Ray and his wife are they're hippies, basically. Yeah. So we talk about how they lived through the 60s and their way of kind of moving from Berkeley University life to Midwestern life to create a life that they're proud of and they're excited about. They end up buying this farm. Neither of them are farmers. His wife's from Iowa, but they go ahead and give it a try. And so they plant corn, and
as you do in Iowa,
totally right. And so then they're kind of finding their way. So here's Ray. Then he's out in the field one day. Wife and daughter are up on the porch, and it's kind of like at dusk, twilight. And he starts hearing this voice, and it's, if you build it, he will come. And so he hears it a couple times, and then he's like, what is that? And that kind of kicks off this beginning of the movie. So if we start there, you and I were riffing on this topic of what is it like? And I just had a conversation with a friend. I was in London. We were on a walk together, and we were having this very conversation about what is it like to hear God's voice in random, mysterious ways that only you hear. And what is it like to then not only decipher what's being said and decipher the source, but then also then to then move into action and actually choose to respond to the voice. So what I find to be personally identify with a lot is in the movie, as Ray hears the voice, he does confide in his wife. And he's like, did you hear that? He's like, hear what? He's like, well, here's what. And he's up in the middle of the night staring out the cornfield, like where he's hearing his voice. He's like, if you build it, he will come. He's like, what will come? If I build what?
Yeah, so many questions.
Yes, frustrating at first of, man, what does this mean? Where's this coming from? And I think sometimes too that I've experienced that many times in life where it was like I was hearing something in my heart and soul that I felt like God was speaking to me, but it was mysterious. It wasn't a complete sentence, complete paragraph. It wasn't really clear instructions. It wasn't like, I read the Old Testament in Genesis, like, okay, Noah's supposed to build the ark, and it's like a engineer's blueprint download of detail. I did not get that. So I got something mysterious, like, if you build it, he will come. And I've faced that a lot in my career. I was kind of writing down in my journal this morning, when are the times I've heard kind of pivotal, seminal shift, whispers of mystery in my life. And then, what was the period of time where I had to learn to, one, decipher what I'm hearing. Second, learn to trust that what I'm hearing is true. Confide in my wife and or close friends to kind of, cross-check this. And then decide over a period of time when or how best move into action from there.
I love how you framed that up just beautifully. It's like you have your own podcast and you're used to talking and sharing your thoughts. And I will have the links to all of Aaron's stuff on the show notes and on the website. But a lot of guys, I mean, I even had it, like you were saying, we have these conversations where, people will say, okay, the Bible is this book that is of all these stories of faith, but that the Spirit doesn't speak anymore, which that's what's the point then, of the Bible? It's like, oh, here's this stuff that God doesn't do anymore. Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah.
And
that's a way to look at it.
That is a way. I don't think we look at it that way, but I think for me, I look at the Bible as here's what's available. Like all this stuff is like what, and it's not like anybody, like you mentioned, reading the Old Testament. None of those guys are like super awesome people. Like God works through sinful people to accomplish his missions.
Got the super awesome award. Yeah. And nor would I or you probably.
Right. No.
Right? So it's good. We're in good company.
So we're going to start. I want to play a clip. It's from that conversation you mentioned where he's laying in bed with his wife. He's heard the voice. He says, I've heard it. And it's really cool how they did it, because in my experience, that's how God speaks, is you'll sort of, it's almost like a warning shot across the bow. It's like, and the important thing to do is to say, well, and like you said, all these questions, like who said it? Who is the voice? If I build what? Who is he? All these questions that come up. And Ray doesn't, he asks them, but he never, until the end, he doesn't even ask the he just assumes who it will be. He thinks he knows. And I think we when we're following God's voice, a lot of times we do the same thing. It's easy to just charge off and do stuff and think that that's right without stopping to ask the questions after the questions. And so he's laying in bed. He sees this. It's cool because he sees a vision. He sees a baseball field in his cornfield with shoeless Joe Jackson, who is his dad's hero. And so much of the father stuff is in this movie. That's, I think, one of the reasons it resonates so much with men, especially I think men in our age range where baseball was important to our dads. And so this conversation with Ray and his wife, as the voice actually is uncovering something deeper in him that finds himself struggling with.
I'm 36 years old. I have a wife, a child, and a mortgage, and I'm scared to death I'm turning into my father.
What's your father got to do with all of this?
I never forgave him for getting old. By the time he was old as I am now, he was ancient. He must have had dreams, but he never did anything about them. For all I know, he may have even heard voices too, but he sure didn't listen to them. Man never did one spontaneous thing in all the years I knew him. And I'm afraid of that happening to me. And something tells me that this may be my last chance to do something about it. I want to build that field. Do you think I'm crazy?
Yes. But I also think if you really feel you should do this, then you should do it.
What the hell is he doing?
He's plowing under his barn.
Why?
Ty Cobb called him the greatest left fielder of all time. They said his glove was the place where triples go to die.
Could he hit?
Could he hit? Lifetime average 356, third highest in history.
Why'd they call him Shoeless Joe?
Well, when he was still in the minors, he'd bought a new pair of spikes and they hurt his feet. So about the sixth inning, he took them off and played the rest of the game in just his socks. The other players kidded him, called him Shoeless Joe, and the name stuck.
He's going to lose his farm.
Damn fool.
Yeah, what resonates for me, just starting on a couple themes there, is the very end when they're talking about he's a damn fool and he's plowing up his field, he's crazy. And that's one. Another theme is around this. He's talking about my dad must have had dreams, but he surely never followed any of them. And third one that he mentions is around, I'm afraid if I don't do it now, this is my only chance. And starting with that one, I would say I don't agree with that in terms of life experience now. So I think for many of you listening, it may also feel like that. There may be, you may not have something that's clear and distinct right now that you feel compelled to do, but you wish you did. Or you did once and you didn't listen to it, or whatever it may be. Or you have this belief that if I don't do it now, this is my one and only chance. And I don't believe that's the case. In my experience, in a vibrant life with God, as we walk out our daily life, God's always offering invitations to us. Now, sometimes they're really, really bold, and sometimes they're really, really small. What I mean by bold and small is bold may mean plow up your field, change your career. But it also could be bold in have a brave conversation with a coworker, with your spouse, with a friend. It could mean prioritize your time in service of others versus in service of self. Like sometimes it shows up as bold to the outside world, and it's like a big pivot, but sometimes it's just an internal shift about what God's inviting us into. So I just would encourage each of us as we're listening, thinking about what is God up to in our life? What are the voices that we're hearing? That part of it is beginning to cultivate the skill, the conscious awareness about noticing when God's speaking. Mm-hmm. And then what I notice with that is that God speaks to an open heart, to a heart that's pliable. Sometimes we get like the Saul road of Damascus. I've never actually had one of those, like full-on confrontations, which I'm grateful for. And as I read the life of Paul, it's like, wow, it really foundationally changed who the guy was. So most of the time we don't have it like that. It's much more subtle. And when people say they don't hear the voice in the field, they don't hear God's voice in their life, I think a lot of that is around a lack of cultivation, around a willingness and openness to actually believe that it is available. God's voice is available to us. And then there's just a sensitivity we develop in a pliable way to be open to hear that.
Well, I think it's interesting how they're using the farm. He's out there in the field when he hears it, which just reminds me of the parable of the four soils, where I think God speaks most clearly, or we are most receptive when our heart is in that condition of the soil, like you said, cultivated. And that's a great word. It's not stony. It's not covered with thorns. It's not, the birds aren't everywhere, but we're at a soft receptive. Yes. Fertile soil. Yeah. And I think that's where we have to be, as you mentioned it. And I love that you're like, where you disagreed with, if I don't do it now, I never will. Because if it's coming from a sense of scarcity, I found that tends to not be the voice of God. I'm listening to wrong voices. If there's that pressure of, if I need to do this now, I've never, when I've been listening to God, it hasn't ever been that pressure that you have to do it now. It's been more like, I have to, because it's sort of how I'm made. It's more of an invitation, bringing his heart alive. And that's what you see in Ray, is his heart comes to life as he's sitting there with his daughter, telling his daughter all the things his dad told him.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that cool? There's a great quote from Parker Palmer, and he says something like, there's this thing that I can't not do for reasons I can't explain to you, or to myself. But nonetheless, I can't not do it. And I think that's compelling, to get to know yourself in your own interior world and to understand that I don't have a good reason for why I should plow up my baseball, my cornfield and put in a baseball field in the middle of rural Iowa. But I know I have to. And the other thing I would add to that too is just a reflection on the number of guys that I've talked with, men over the years, that, let's just say, heard a voice, feel compelled, are ready to do something outlandish, and are dragging their children and their wife and their friends, kicking and screaming, into their mythic story, is way more frequent than not. And one of the things I find is wildly reckless is, I heard a voice. Sorry, you didn't hear it too. And tough, you're coming with me because we have to do this. And I find that it doesn't ever really go well. No. The magic piece of this story is his wife, his lovely, lovely wife, says, yes, you are crazy. This sounds crazy. And they have cultivated a relationship between themselves where there's trust, there's care, safety, there's protection. And in that, they're jointly, as partners, choosing to follow the voice. And that is a huge distinction. And I find that, especially, and I'll include myself in this, when I was in my mid-30s, I was just ready to take on the world and was really feeling afraid that my world had gotten so small with just kids and family responsibilities and career, that it was like, well, I'm made for something bigger than just what felt like just this. I can now see with my kids in their 20s and my marriage, knocking on 30 years, those were really, really important, deeply foundational years I was spending there. And I wasn't living in a small story. It just felt like there was attributes of it where it felt really small, very suburban. I felt fenced in. And my wife and I, through thick and thin, and we've had both, have cultivated a way where we've learned to trust one another as we learn to foster our ability to hear what God's inviting us into.
Yeah. And I think that's also an important distinction, because if you are taking this approach and I've heard God tell me this, I have this vision for where I'm supposed to go. And like you said, he brought his his daughter along, he brought his wife along, and that's what you want, right? You want to be engaged. You're like, yeah, I want to do something crazy. There's a part of, we are sort of reckless, but if you're going into it and I'm not saying everybody, nobody is going to, everybody else pretty much disagrees with what Ray is doing. But the most important people,
unit.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So when we're talking about our dreams, you do have to be careful who you're giving it to, because there will be like, damn fool, what's he doing? Yeah. He's going to lose the farm. But if you've got
true, it actually might be true. He might lose the farm. And this is the conversation I was just having with a friend when I was in London. We were taking a walk in Hyde Park talking about this, of when have you heard a voice that feels like it's reckless because you're plowing up your field. And if we land it in the literal, so for me, that's my career. Like I've had multiple times where I'm doing this career. So I was in software for a long time, for about 13 years. And I had a really predictable career. If I did this job, I was in commercial sales. And if I wanted to move industries, I could do that. If I wanted to move roles around, I could do that. But fundamentally, like in the career field of software, I had established myself. So I had lots of fields of corn. And what I was feeling called to do, the voice in the whisper, was to leave behind that career and go start a new career in executive consulting and executive coaching. And I was like, wow. Well, so I left that career left the career. And then I remember one night we had neighborhood kids, my kids' friends, over for dinner. And we were sitting down to eat and we stopped to pray before we began. And one of the neighborhood kids said, I want you to know our family is praying for you that you can get a job. And it was super sweet. I was like really appreciative. Like, oh, like, tell me more. Well, yeah, I know you're out of work right now. Kind of like the whole, felt like in the moment, like the whole neighborhood knows, which felt to me like those people on the dirt road saying, he's crazy. Doesn't he know he's going to lose his farm? So I cried that night later on after she left because I realized it's like, this looks like I'm insane. Like what? Like my wife, I don't even know if she was working at the time. She was working a little bit, I think. So it was very clear to the outsider I was plowing up my fields.
Right.
And this is insane. People don't do this. And willfully getting rid of your provision, your predictable, steady, reliable provision for food, clothing, and shelter. Now, what they didn't know is we had some savings and some things, but we were truly betting the farm on this career change, which ended up taking like 6 months. And it came down to my very first bit of work with clients. We were down to $1,500 in our checking account. And then the only thing we had left to then tap into would have been like home equity or retirement stuff, which was still, I was appreciative that we even had that as a secondary plan. And I ended up getting a gig. And then by the time the payment terms came in, we were down to like 2 days. But in the beginning, I didn't know that. I was just plowing up our field. My wife and I did that in partnership. We took a big risk and literally bet the farm on going forward. And no one around us really understood. I actually had a friend come out. He flew in from Memphis just to be with me and encourage me, a kind of older brother. And he said, what you are doing is risky. And I think it's healthy risk. It's a healthy risk you can run. You can always go back and replant the field. You could always go get another software job. And I think it's courageous that you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're saying, but at least I tried. Right.
It's funny. My experience, my story is similar where I was in nursing. I left a job as a nurse manager to make significantly less as an educator. And what I experienced was like, yeah, we don't have the same amount of money. But when I got home, I was home. Like I was like, I've got more done in the first 6 weeks around the house than I had in 6 years prior.
Right.
Because I wasn't, being a manager of a nursing unit, it's constant. It's 24/7 pressures, staffing and all the stuff. And then when being in education, one is I'm doing something that actually connects to my heart. And so I will go home and I'm not beat down, just want to check out and just like being completely exhausted from giving everything giving it all at the job. Yeah. And so I actually have stuff to give to my wife, to the family, to the kids, to my friends even. And that's what, again, going back to that clip, that's what you see is you've got the outsiders who are doubting. It's like, what are you doing? It makes no sense. And it doesn't.
Right. Even to us that we're in the story making the choices, it doesn't always make sense to us either.
Am I crazy? Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Right. So Paul, for you, what's been the result of those shifts that you've made for you and for your life, for your family, for your friendships, for the vibrant life in you? What's been the shift from before when you were giving it all away to now when you're in service of your family?
It's a realization of what is truly valuable, of where my wealth really is. And I love Morgan had talked about wealth is an accumulation of things that money can't buy.
Yeah. And
to the point now where for about the last year, I've been, as you mentioned, out of a job. And by out of a job, I just mean I've chosen not to teach. I've chosen not to be a part of that because my wife took a promotion, which has been much more demanding on her time. And she's been working from home. So we have dogs. So she doesn't have time to manage the dogs at home. And so I manage the dogs. We've got kids. We've got grandkids. We've got stuff around the house. And so one of my sons went to college, and I was like, I want to be available for his last month home and to be able to take him. And so I was like, I'm going to tell them I can't teach this next session, this next semester. And then it's interesting, again, how you see God working, because later that month, my mother-in-law got sick and her health deteriorated over the next couple of months, so that after Thanksgiving, she passed away. But for me to be able to be there to say, no, we're going to have, her dad over 3 nights a week to have dinner with him, and to be available to give to them, and that the richness and depth of your life is what I've experienced through walking. And I don't think either one of us are saying walk away from your job.
No.
Especially if you've got your wife who's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Let me land some, what I think we're saying here is King David wrote, "You're blessed when you stay on course, walking steadily on the road revealed by God." So that key is the road revealed. You're blessed when you follow his direction, doing your best to find him, doing your best to hear the voices in the fields. That's right. You don't go off on your own. You walk straight along the road that he set. And for me, what's important with that is that's the question. What is the road that's in front of us? It may be the road that we're on. And that's great. Well, then walk steadily along that road. Don't do a lot of second guessing. Don't do a lot of comparison. Keep walking on that road and know that the voice in the field is available, not just for crazy making, left-hand detours, but for just the keep going, you're on the right path. And then I'll read this other one from St. Paul in Galatians. Make a careful exploration of who you are and the work that you've been given, and sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can your own life. And for me, what's really important with that and how it links to the movie is around this make a careful exploration of who I am and the work that I've been given. And it may be the cornfield. It may just be on the tractor year after year. That's cool. It may be, in my case, software for 13 years. It is and was my family. And not comparing myself with others. So not looking at Paul's life and saying, oh man, I wish I was hosting podcasts at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. Boy, the last time I did that was some time ago. No, I'm going to stay on my course, on my path. I'm not going to compare myself, but I am going to take responsibility for doing the creative best I can with my own life. And with that, then that means I have to be really in tuned to who I am, what is in front of me are my responsibilities, and then also what does enable for my heart to be vibrant and alive. And sometimes that means adjustments in big changes. And oftentimes what I find is that means rhythm about life. It means actually having careful practices and rituals and habits in my life that, again, cultivate, back to that word, fertile soil in me, where I am responsive and pliable and sensitive to what moves or shifts might need to be made in my life to continue to live that vibrant, alive life.
And it is the pliable, the word, because we get this, like he said, if you build it, he will come. And he's thinking it's Shoeless Joe Jackson. And there's many times that I find that the reason that I did something, like for instance, my wife and I have been going on medical mission trips to Uganda since 2015. COVID took that out, but my brother, they set up a trip. It was going to be very small, very sort of intimate. The people who have been before, so because it's going to be flexible, it's going to be fast moving. It's going to be, who knows where we're going to be staying, what we're going to be eating. You need to go with the flow. And for my wife, when the question comes up of Uganda, the question is, can she get off work? If yes, then she's going, because that's what makes her heart come alive. And every year for me, I don't know. I have to check. Let me check with God and see what it's like, if this is what it is. And this time when I got it, and it wasn't as clear as sometimes is, but the thing that kept kind of popping up is, it's not your mission. Because it's what I love doing it, because I get to go with my wife. I get to do something with my brother. It's not my big overall, the burning thing I can't not do. And so I had a friend who was going to be in town. I was like, I really want to see him because I haven't seen him in a year. I think I need to be here for that. Well, that week that she's gone and that friend was in town, we couldn't get together. But that same week, my son left college, so I had to go pick his stuff up from the dorm, move him back. And I had another friend whose father passed away after 5 years with ALS. And I'm like, if I had been in Uganda when one of my best friends' dad died and not been able to go to the funeral, that would have crushed me. Because I was like, oh, this, it's something we've known is coming and prepared for. But you see that he's built a field for shoeless Joe Jackson. And it's really not for shoeless Joe Jackson.
Right. We find out in the end.
Right. And that's where you see, and to be able to be flexible, to be pliable, to be, I love in the Proverbs, it says, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. It's not GPS. It's not a triptych to go old school with AAA. You can see the step in front of you. You can see the next move.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you were down to 2 days. Yeah. Like if that had been in the trailer, like, I'm not sure I want to do that.
Oh, right. Yeah. So luckily I didn't get a complete download about how thin that would get.
So we'll jump to the end of the movie, because I want to make sure that we can maximize Aaron's time. And we're going to go to the end where Ray is, he brings back Terry, his writer friend, or his, like, the famous guy. And he gets the invitation to go into the corn, go out on it for a night with the boys. And it's like, I'm not saying what's in it for me, but what's in it for me?
For me. I built the field. Yeah.
It's my corn you're staying in. Because we all get there at some point.
Damn it. Yeah.
And then as everybody else leaves, and he's looking at shoeless Joe Jackson, and he's grinning at him. And he realizes that the real purpose of building the field, of finding Terry, of the whole process had nothing to do with baseball, but it had to do with the easing. I don't think easing of who would turn out to be his father, as he sees his father taking off the catcher's gear, but easing and repairing and restoring his own heart.
What are you grinning at, you ghost?
If you build it, he will come.
God.
What is it?
It's my father. Ease his pain.
Go the distance.
It was you.
No, Ray. It was you.
The scene messes me up every time.
I know. I'm like listening to the little short clip, and I'm getting all teary-eyed and emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think what hits me in it every time is it's actually whatever story we think it is, it's better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we hear the voice, we step out and risk and move forward. We think it's for a particular set of things. It's like, oh, it's because Shoeless Joe's going to come play.
Right.
Oh, it's because if I, stay home with my kids, in your case, I can help my son move out of the dorm. And those are true. And it's always better than that. It's always something I find in my life with God. It's always like a long list of things I would have never even thought to ask for. I didn't even know I needed. I didn't know I wanted. And then all of a sudden I find myself. So for instance, one of the things I think of is during one of those seasons when I plowed up my cornfield. I've done it many times. It's not just once. One of the times I plowed up my cornfield, I went down to 3 days a week in a career I had, and reduced my income by about half, and was home while my daughter was she's our youngest. And while she was home, let's say 14 to 18, roughly. So for about 3-4 years, I took her to school every day until she could drive. I spent a lot of time with her friends. I cooked dinner. Like, I was home. I didn't travel for work very infrequently, and had this really choiceful, purposeful choice, I guess is what I would call it. And the abundance that came out of that season of just choosing to be available, to be home, I had so many things that came back to me that I didn't even know. And the years of investment in our relationship, she and I together, the investment in myself and my own wellness, like there was just, bountiful ROI in ways I would have never understood. So I love that scene. And I love also, just like you said from the opener, of there's a healing in him that happens in Ray Kinsella's, in Kevin Costner, that is far beyond not only what it offered his father in that scene that they go on to play catch together.
Yeah.
But it's also healing something in Ray where he becomes a more wholehearted man in ways he never knew that was part of the deal.
Right.
He was just, like you said, he thought it was about baseball and Shoeless Joe. And he didn't love corn anyway.
And that's why, again, that scene with his daughter on the tractor and he's talking to her. And like you said, that's the investment. I mean, it could be, my daughter and I started having breakfast after I dropped my youngest off at high school. And like you mentioned, that time, I believe there's no time wasted spending it with God. But I don't know. And I think the same is true for our families. That if you're spending your time there and that's where God's going to lead you, is a deeper, like you said, it's better than you can imagine. And so this has been a fast and furious rush through, and we didn't even rush through it. I think we really nailed this topic and this idea that we have been discussing over the email over the last week or so. And so, Aaron, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time and your push to introduce me into this movie. And you guys should watch it, especially as we kick off the summer. And it's great, even if you don't love baseball, because it's not really about baseball.
But even if you don't, the magic of baseball, you'll fall in love with because of this movie.
Yeah.
And we'd encourage you, as you guys watch the movie, reach out to Paul, reach out to me, tell us what's resonating with you, and love to keep the dialogue going.
Yeah. So thank you very much again, Aaron, for joining me this early Wednesday morning. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?